Hello world, and thanks for tuning in for the 75th time to Master English with Tim, the podcast where Tim helps you master English in depth and detail, and without ever hurrying. I'm Tim, writer, polyglot, world traveler, native speaker of English, English teacher since 2005, and podcaster since April of 2023. In this week's episode, I'm going to tell you about 11 words and expressions that you can use to talk about competition. Let's start with the basics. Let's start with the verb compete. When someone competes, they participate in an event with one or more other people or groups and try to win. So, you can compete by trying to win when you play basketball or chess. Competing happens not just in sports, but also between companies and countries. So, Nike and Adidas compete with each other, and China and the US also compete. Let's move on to the noun of compete, which is competition. Competition just means the act of competing with someone. So, there is, for example, some competition between traditional taxis and Ubers. Especially in Europe, there is competition for passengers between trains and airplanes. Our noun competition has two more meanings. The first meaning is a formal, organized event in which two or more people or teams compete with each other. So, you could say that a rugby match is a competition, or that the Olympic Games are a competition, but normally we just call those games or matches. We use the word competition for events that are a bit more unusual and don't happen as often. For example, you might have a fishing competition. That's not something you do every week. And in English-speaking countries, we sometimes have spelling competitions. As anyone who is listening to this podcast right now knows, English spelling is pretty difficult, and in fact, it's also difficult for native speakers of English, and so that's why we have spelling competitions. Actually, we have a special term for spelling competitions. We typically call them spelling bees. That's B-E-E-S. A spelling bee, two spelling bees. So, the last meaning of competition is the people or groups that one is competing against. I told you that competition has two additional meanings beyond the first one, so that the third meaning is, again, the people or groups that one is competing against. So, think about it. Who is your competition if you are PepsiCo? Well, in that case, your competition is Coca-Cola. And who is your competition if you are Pizza Hut? I would say then that your competition is Domino's and also maybe Subway and Burger King. If you want to talk more specifically about one person or group that you're competing against, use the word competitor. So, for example, Ford and Volkswagen are competitors. Or if you're a member of a basketball team, then all of the other local teams are your competitors. Before we move on from words like competition and competitor that use the verb compete as their base, let's talk about one interesting synonym for compete. That synonym is vie. That's spelled V-I-E. If you vie for something, you compete against someone else for something. For example, kids can vie with one another for their parents' attention. Athletes in the Olympic Games vie for gold. The many millions of videos on YouTube all vie for viewers, and the channels that make the videos vie for money from advertisers. A lot of companies and people vie with or compete with each other, but not all competitors are rivals. A rival is a competitor with whom you have an especially competitive relationship. Sometimes brothers and sisters are each other's rivals, competing for their parents' attention and even love. Way back in the 1980s, Coke and Pepsi were rivals. Right now, Coke, I think, has pretty much the upper hand. It's winning. Google's Android operating system and Apple's iOS are also rivals. Nike and Adidas are rivals. When two competitors or rivals are in equal or very nearly equal positions, we can say that they are neck and neck. So, if two companies both have, for example, 26% market share, we can say they are neck and neck. The expression be neck and neck almost definitely comes from horse racing. When there's a horse race, of course you want to see which horse is going to win, but it's hard to see where the horse's legs are because there are so many legs moving so fast. So if you want to see who's winning, it's much easier to look at the horse's necks. Presidential elections in the United States will happen a few months after this episode is published, and right now, it looks like the race between the two candidates is neck and neck. It's impossible to say who will win. Some companies and people have an especially competitive relationship and are therefore rivals, but we can say of only a few rivals that they are also nemeses. The relationship between two nemeses is special and has three characteristics. Actually, give me 1 second. I'm going to spell for you the singular and the plural. The singular of nemesis is N-E-M-E-S-I-S. One nemesis. The plural is N-E-M-E-S-E-S. Nemeses. One nemesis, many nemeses. So again, I said the relationship between nemeses is special and it has three characteristics. First, both sides, both nemeses, have comparable power and influence. In other words, to be nemeses, you don't have to be neck and neck with each other. Second, both sides, both nemeses, spend a very large amount of their time and effort thinking about how to make their other nemesis fail. And third, when your nemesis fails, you feel really great. And so, you may be ready to steal, lie, or even kill to succeed yourself and make your nemesis fail. So, how about some examples of nemeses? We can say that Saudi Arabia and Iran are nemeses, or Iran and Israel, or that the United States and the Soviet Union were nemeses. Being nemeses doesn't have to be deadly, though. For example, I would say that Airbus and Boeing are nemeses. They're always trying to steal each other's business. Boeing is based in the US and tries to steal business from its nemesis Airbus, even in Europe, and Airbus tries to steal business from Boeing, even in the US. As I record this episode, it's September 8th, 2024, and I think Airbus has some good chances to steal business from Boeing because Boeing has had a lot of scandals related to the safety of its airplanes recently. One really powerful verb that you can use to talk about competition is thwart. That's kind of a funny sounding verb, so let me spell it for you. T-H-W-A-R-T. Thwart. When you thwart your rival or nemesis's plans, or really anybody's plan, you don't just make the plan fail, but you also make your rival or nemesis feel very upset or even crazy that their plan failed. Also, when you thwart a plan, we usually mean that the plan was to do something bad or evil. So, Airbus could thwart Boeing's plans to sell more planes in Europe by convincing the European Union to make laws that are favorable to Airbus, but a stronger example of thwarting a plan is when the police thwart a terrorist attack, or your IT department at work thwarts hackers trying to steal the company's data. If a competitor becomes weaker, we can say that they falter. So if you listen to the financial news, you can often hear that the dollar or the yen or the euro faltered, or that the stock price of this or that company faltered. And of course, when you're competing, if you falter, your rival will quickly try to take advantage of your weakness, so watch out. Now, here's a great and very specific verb for talking about competition. The verb is topple. That's T-O-P-P-L-E. If you topple something, for example, you topple a tower or a glass of water or a card house, you push it down and make it fall. If you topple your rival or nemesis, who is in the number one or leading position though, it means that you take or steal that leading position from your rival. If your rival was the second biggest company in your market and you took second place from them, that's really amazing and awesome, but I'm sorry to tell you that you didn't really topple them. You can only topple someone when they are on the top and number one. An even more dramatic sounding synonym of topple is the verb oust. That's O-U-S-T. When you oust someone, you take away their position of power. So, a congressman or congresswoman could be ousted in an election. A president or monarch could be ousted by their own country's military. A pop song that is number one right now, today, could also be ousted by another artist's song tomorrow or the next day. And a company that's a leader in its industry could be ousted by an old rival or by a startup. The last synonym that we have for topple or oust, and the smartest sounding one, is usurp. That's U-S-U-R-P. Like I said, this is a really smart sounding word. Not all English speakers know it. So it's not just a C2 word, it's what I call a D1 word. Normally, the person that you usurp is a queen or king, and you take away their power in a dishonest way. And of course, taking away a king or queen's power is a very difficult thing to do, so you have to be very clever to do it. And even then, it doesn't happen very often. So if you use usurp in a metaphorical sense when talking about companies, it sounds like someone has acted in an especially clever way to unexpectedly take the top position away from the market leader. And now that I think about it, it's also possible, for example, that a man, let's call him John, is in love with a woman who has a boyfriend. Let's call this second man Dave. John convinces the woman to leave Dave and have a relationship with him, John. In this case also, we could say that John usurped Dave. By the way, if you want to learn more super advanced D1 words, then I suggest you listen to episode 19, Learn D1 English with Ancient Word Roots. Okay, that's all for this week. Thanks for listening, everyone. Don't forget to share and review my channel. Until next Monday, everybody.